Hey everybody, good to see you. Lee, how you doing?
I am great, Randy. Good to be here.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. Another fantastic podcast today. This is episode 167. Really excited to have Lee Hacohen here, who is head of sales at Regie.ai. And we have an awesome title topic, which is Can AI really solve the pipeline problem? So very, very cool for sure. We're sponsored today by Alexander Group, who's the go-to-market and the sales comp sponsor of Sales Community. And as always, Sales Community, if anybody is for those that are members, thank you very much. For those that are not, Tucker just posted the link, and Tucker, we may need to slide that extra E over. There you go. Thanks. So you can click on the link and you can get a free membership, lots of great content and other information there for you. So by way of introduction, Lee lives with his family in the Bay Area in Walnut Creek. He's got a lovely wife and two teenagers that I know he's very proud of. And we originally met, we think, back in the fall of 22 at a GTM Fund event in Phoenix. And really from the get-go, besides us being in the maybe 5 or 10 percentile, the older folks that were there.
Come on, don't give that away, Randy.
We
definitely got people here.
Yeah, had never met before, truth be told, but had to figure it out as you frequently do, a bunch of common friends and colleagues, and was definitely impressed with his go-to-market and sales chops. So really happy to have you on with us today, Lee. Thank
you. Great to be here.
And also by way of introduction with some other people that know him better. So Matt Millen, who's a co-founder and president of Regie.ai, says Lee is the best in the business, an award-winning sales leader with over 20 years of success and impact. Lee balances his approach of dedicated work ethic with poise and humor. I'm proud to work with Lee and grateful for his contributions. So that's pretty cool.
Wow, that's nice of you to.
There you go. Sam Nelson says, I didn't report to Lee, but every AE that reported to him loved him. He has a reputation for going to bat for his people, and AEs loved working for him. So that's really cool. And Sam McKenna, who's also a rock star in her own right, says, you never met a better combination of a sharp, witty humor, a caring and excellent question asker, who happens to also have the best sales leadership and go-to-market advice.
Wow.
That's probably about the best sentence
ever. Part of this show so far for me.
There you go. One couldn't ask for a better leader, friend, and mentor. So all great recommendations there. And yes, I will send them to you.
Thank you. I will frame those because those are three very impressive people.
Very, very cool, for sure. So jumping right into the questions, you were undergrad at University of Hawaii.
Correct.
And had the opportunity to do a year at UMass while you were there. So that was probably an interesting experience. But after University of Hawaii, you actually started in the broadcasting field, correct?
Correct. At that time, I had the opportunity to get in with first in the publication side with Rupert Murdoch's Murdoch Magazines, and that led into a stint at Fox, and had the opportunity to then go to Amsterdam. So after a number of years in Hawaii and working in the Asia Pacific market, I had the opportunity to go to Amsterdam and experience broadcast in the European market, working for HMG, which is the big broadcaster owned by Bertelsmann and Amsterdam. And then things happened. It was like the .com was blowing up, and they were looking for people who were native English speakers, and you just heard it was an opportunity to come aboard and get involved in the startup market. And that's how I kind of made this evolution into that side of the business. And then that just opened my eyes to everything that was possible there. And by the time I moved back to the US, I met an expat in Amsterdam who was from the Bay Area. We moved back to the Bay Area, and like the entire startup world and everything great and online, the online business. And I started there, and that's how I got introduced into the world of Tech Target, which I know you know a lot of the founders and folks at Tech Target, and that kept me close to Massachusetts. I got to come back every month to Massachusetts because I fell in love with when I was at UMass, and it was great. It just continued and went from there into software and at On24, and that's where started managing teams and getting exposed to the SaaS offerings and that side of the business. And then I was introduced to outreach, jumped into outreach, which I was oftentimes you use a product and you realize how phenomenal it is. And that was my experience there. We were using it. I was like, this is incredible. I would love to work for them, and made that happen. And we took that from, at the time, maybe 7 million to 100 million. And then, that was also where I realized I love the build and grow aspect of the business. And so since then, I've really been identifying and looking for companies that are in that build and grow phase. And that's my favorite part. And it's exciting to be now at Regie, which is in that exact same moment with a lot of some of the players that we all were at outreach together, and now we're together at Regie.
Awesome. So cool. Very, very impressive for sure. So our title topic is, can AI really solve the pipeline problem? And I guess before we get into the whole AI side, just I think pipeline in general is probably, I don't know if there's any measuring stick, but in the 30 plus years I've been working, I don't think it's ever been worse.
Yeah, I talked to a number of sales and marketing leaders just in the role, just out in the industry at events, and you're sensing that it seems to be a top issue for everyone.
Yeah, and it's also obviously there's issues, kind of emails bouncing and things like that, but there's I don't know if I can say it appropriately, but kind of just like this laziness factor where, back in the day when we're selling, you're all over, leads and asking for references and cold calling and kind of everything else. But it's kind of like this, for lack of a better word, laziness factor. And people just kind of want these like leads handed to them.
Yeah. Or in an outbound world, although this has been, in fairness, going on for a while since email became one of the primary sources, the spray and pray approach. So we were hearing about that 10 years ago as such. But you're right. I mean, you're bringing up a time we're probably aging ourselves, where if you asked for your list, they handed you the yellow pages and said, "Here's your list." I mean, that's right. It. Get working, and you had to create a territory out of that. And now, true, there is a expectation in some areas, in some business, that you'll come in and open your computer and your calendar will be filled with meetings and they're all qualified and all ready to buy, and you should do that. And that's just not the case. And so that's where that pipeline dilemma comes in, and everyone's got to work for it.
Yeah, interesting for sure. So digressing then into the AI side of things, how are you seeing AI impact the sales profession in general?
Well, I know as Regie is an AI AI company and one of the early adopters of AI. In fact, 4 years, like even well before the craze that's just come out around OpenAI and ChatGPT and all the things that have come out, Regie was doing this years before, one of the early adopters of it. So number of people come up to us and ask, probably the most common question I'll hear is AI going to replace me, like as a salesperson, as a sales leader?
Right.
And it's, I have one simple answer for that, and that's absolutely not. It's not going to replace the salesperson. Now, what AI does, and I talk about it in the terms of, there's certain things machines do really well, and there's certain things people do really well. And one life example that comes to mind is we have a self-driving car, and my wife firmly believes that the self-driving car is a better driver than I am. So It is potentially true. It is definitely insulting, but there is a case to where there is a case, you look at it and you go, what do humans do better? What do people do better?
Yeah.
And the same is true in the sales process, right? And there's certain things that machines can do really well. And so if you look at sort of the workloads that we have in the sales process or sales cycle or process, say, and you say, what are those different workloads? And then you determine, what does the machine do better? What do people do better? And what I mean by that.
So let's start there. So what are the things then that the machine does better?
Sure.
From thinking about the
Let's
sales
look at
process.
it. When you think about prospecting, one of the first things you're doing is you're identifying your ICP, and you know who you're going to go after. And these are the titles and these are the companies. And then you have to go out and go out and find the contacts and who are those people and what roles. So I know the personas and I know the titles, but so someone may go to LinkedIn and start searching for those companies and those roles. Oh, great, I found them. And LinkedIn's amazing, but guess what LinkedIn doesn't do? Give you their email or their phone number. So then you've got to go to another platform, say Zoom Info or Apollo or something like that, and you've got to go and grab their contact information. And then you've got to go and get that information into your CRM. And then so when you look at it, and we ask, we'll do this all the time. We'll talk to sales leaders and we'll say, how much time does your team spend in just that activity alone? And so you bucket that together, and then you find another thing. Great, you've now identified who they are. You have their contact information. Now you got to actually write a compelling message to them. So to your point, the lazy way is just just take a templated email and send it out to 1,000 people. One of the people you talked to previously, Sam McKenna, she has a moniker, show me you know me. Like, in order to actually connect with someone and get their attention in an inbox that has 60 emails in it, you have to show them that you know them. You have to put some work in and research that and do that well and understand their
somewhat customized, so it's not just a generic reach out.
I gotta figure out what their pain is and why it's relevant and why they should talk to me and what they should do. So we'll ask sales leaders, how much time do they spend personalizing the emails? And then you have that in their week before they even hit send. And then comes the next, the following it. So if you just take those two elements of discovering contacts, bringing them in, doing that stuff, doing the research, personalizing, and doing that side of the business, then there's also personalizing your LinkedIn invitations. We all know it's a cardinal sin. Do not just hit send and connect. Write a personal note in the connection request that does that. You'll get much better results. That's more time.
I don't, but I know that's
okay,
good.
But you're Randy. Come on, you're like Cher or Taylor. You just one name. You're Randy. You don't. We're talking about up and coming sales reps here, right?
Well, what? Let's digress for a sec. So I feel I'm at, I don't know what I'm whatever the max is, 30,000. So I think I'm like 29,000 and change. So like, unless somebody's like, I for sure know, or gold or whatever, there's no way I'm letting anybody in, which is different from 5-10 years ago. Whatever.
Right. But that's why
you're a new seller now trying to connect. I mean, it's got to be, as everybody's starting to get maxed up. First of all, I think it's a stupid rule to have the 30,000, whatever. So I don't know, I got to figure out how to go back and cut. But if you're like these sellers, it's going to make it that much harder, as people are definitely a lot more critical than what they were, again, 5-10 years ago. Right.
Right. And exactly. So you're going to have the fun task, like when you're stuck on a plane somewhere, you can go in and start cutting people. That's what you'll have to do to get, so you can bring do the 30. But you're right. So what happens is you take a look at those workloads that traditionally are done by people. And when we talk to companies and many of our clients, we find that it's somewhere between, I'd say on average, like 30 and 50% between 30 and 50 are just doing of their 40-hour work week are doing those two in the prospecting selling motion. So this would be SDRs or full cycle sellers who are responsible for their own prospecting. They're spending 30 to 50% of those times on those two tasks: discovering contacts, bringing them in, and researching and personalizing.
Yep.
Those are two great examples of what a machine does really well.
So if I'm a security company and I sell to CISOs, then what you're saying is you can basically leverage AI in the example that you're given to say, okay, I want to go target CISOs of certain size companies that happen to be US based, and then, personalize kind of what the note is. So it says if it's whatever, Shopify, hey, sorry, looks like you kind of missed your earnings number, stock is down, probably, you need to, sell more, but kind of from a security side, maybe you're even more susceptible. So here's why you need our solution. So you're kind of personalizing it. You say, here's what our message is, and do that in a more automated fashion, as opposed to that taking a sales rep 20 or 30 minutes to do.
Correct. You're hired, Randy.
Okay.
You're ready to come aboard and work at Red, because that is you got it, because that is something a machine can do. So we're able to take exactly what you described, identify the personas of the company, because it's more than just a CISO, right? Oftentimes it's a CISO, but it could also be the VP of security, and it could
just
also
identifying
be
that as a
manager.
Identify who all those people are. Yes.
Right. But when you think about it, the message that's below the line and above the line, if you're familiar with that vernacular, meaning, the above the line economic buyer, whichever your sales methodology you like to talk about, they tend to have different pain points and challenges than a person below the line, which may be more tactical in doing that side. Still is important to your buying cycle, and maybe, and you do want to influence and have a conversation with them. But oftentimes sales reps, and especially junior and new ones, think about it, the SDRs that security company brings in are oftentimes right out of college, don't have a lot of experience, don't do that. And that conversation that you should be having with the above the line economic buyer decision maker, very different than below the line. The pain point that they have and the value proposition is different. To teach and train all those people, and by the way, they last 6 months, 9 months, and then they're going to either want a promotion or go somewhere else or do that side of it. Then you're starting over again. This is a classic case where the machine can do that better than having to retrain a new person on that content and messaging, because the machine or the AI will go identify who are those people with those titles, all of them, identify them, bring in their contact information, all that good stuff, put it into the CRM, then write the email exactly as you described. The machine goes and looks at LinkedIn or other things, identifies something about them personally, identifies about the company, what you described in earnings of that aspect, and writes a personalized email, all within, literally within seconds. And where that really helps is when you start, especially sort of in the mid-market.
It's a no-brainer. It doesn't matter if
it's a no-brainer, right?
I have examples. Tucker, who's behind the scenes, I didn't give Tucker a shout out. Tucker is always thanks Tucker. We have I'll say client, sales community sponsor, and the rep will send kind of these template notes for us to kind of send out. So we have a way that we do it. And one was to the CEO of SHI. Another one was the CEO of Ingram Micro. This literally happened this morning.
Right.
And it's just this generic. The rep says, okay, just take the generic template and all that. I'm like, what are you kidding? Like, you gotta personalize it. You're going to the CEO, and by the way, the ask isn't necessary for meeting for them. It's going to be introduction to, somebody on their team that handles kind of what this area is. But how do you not just like crazy that happens? So there's a whole bunch of other thoughts going through my head in terms of, I think, some things we could probably collaborate on. But just the notion of all that, being able to do that is amazing. So say if your AI can actually do this, then
what was if? That's not if. No, you were
Oh,
saying.
when? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
When you do it, sorry.
that's all right. We're doing it.
When you do that, but
Right.
then is there's still human interaction needed to then kind of do a quick once over, right? To make sure that
So
everything's
how we do that, and this is also part of the magic of AI, is prompt engineering, which is another, I'll go off on a sidetrack on that in a second, but prompt engineering in AI is essentially the directions that you're giving the machine of the tone, the quality, how you want the email to be framed. So we'll give best practices, but people have their own choices, right? And they'll be like, is it short? Is it long? Does it have, like, first from a format, but mostly from a tone? So when you think about it, the tone that you speak to in your example, a security professional, is going to be really different than the tone that you might speak to a marketing or a sales leader or right, or a community, whatever your enablement,
security. Well, you go to
HR.
CRO versus security.
Yeah, a security
Technical
person
Yeah.
is like, you get to the point, be serious, don't be quippy, don't do that. And you train the AI to speak that way. You train it based on a grade level, you train it based on tone, you do this. And so to answer your question, once you build that, the prompts in a way, and you run examples for the people, once they start seeing the examples, they get it. Like, that's it. You don't have to look at every email, because that's where the efficiencies come in. Although that setting is possible, the best practice is that you are letting the emails go in that way. Now, there's another area. First, I'm going to digress and talk about the prompt engineering, because this is a public service, because we both have kids. Yours are already out of college. But prompt engineering is the new programming. Like, if there, where we used to tell your kid, oh, go and study programming, go study programming. Right now, there are so many jobs that are needed for people who can do prompt engineering. And I joke about it that.
So what is prompt engineering?
Right. This is the prompt engineers are the people who actually write the prompts for AI that train the agents. And there are so many jobs that people are looking for that. And I laugh about it because it's not something that you actually have to have a highly technical skill. People used to joke where you meet someone and you go, I'm a philosophy major. And you go, well, where the hell are you going to get a job, right? This actually is a job, because philosophy majors and doing it's a way of thinking, because what you're doing is you're thinking, how do I prompt this machine to give me the output that I'm looking? And yes, there's some elements of coding, whereas, if you put two commas instead of this, you'll get a this. But a lot of it just has to do with what you are you're training this agent to be like a human, to talk like you want it to talk. And you try things, and then you see the response, and you're, oh, that was pretty good, let me just adjust the words this way. And so it is a role that writers or people who have that can actually would do really well there. So that's sort of the big tip. Tell your kids to go in and write, because that's going to be the wave of the future. Basically, training AI, training the agents, and doing that side of it. So where I was going to come back was the second thing an agent can do better. A third thing an agent can do better is determine when and how to follow up with someone. And what I mean by that, Randy, is when I first got to Outreach, the sequence was like, everyone at that point was using tools like, why is it leaving my mind? But it was ToutApp and Yesware. And people thought, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing in the world. I can send 5,000 emails all at one time and hit send, and it'll do that. And right out of my inbox. And that was where that spray and pray came out. And then when Outreach came out with the idea of the sequence, which Sam Nelson perfected in his Agogi concept through the practice of running SDR teams at Outreach. And he really perfected that, where this idea of, instead of just sending an email and then hopefully you remember to go back into your sent email and forward it to someone and go, hey, I didn't hear from you, or something like that, or maybe call 3 days after. We would always ask people, like, hey, how often, when a person gets an inbound lead, how often do they follow up before they move on to something else? And there were always two answers. It was either like 3 to 5 times, or it was, I have no idea. Both of those are scary answers, because through research, we found out that it takes between 8 to 12 touches to actually even get a reply and to do that side of it. So all those people who were giving up after 3 to 5 were losing, we're never even getting to the point that they would get a reply. And so this idea of a sequence or cadence, depending which team you're on, outreach or sales a lot, but a sequence or cadence was this idea of a series of touches over a period of time with multiple channels, whether it's email, social, calling. And that period, that was revolutionary at the time and garnered the results of, like, day 3 call, day 5 do a bump email, automated day 7 add to it, that whole approach, revolutionary. And then, so what was exciting is Matt Millen, who's the co-founder of Regie, former Outreach, had this idea of how would AI do this, in the sense that creating what's referred to as a dynamic sequence. What a dynamic sequence does is it instead uses, based on the replies and responses or engagement of the user, prioritizing whether you should speed up the content or provide it, say, call this person right now. They're forwarding it, they're engaging, they're clicking, they're doing it. It's providing warm calling instead of cold calling, right? This person is engaged with your content. And because now you are going to use AI to maybe only serve the most engaged, before, when you were having to call all 300 people on day 3, that's the maximum you could use. You could handle at a time, because you had to call all 300 on day 3. And that was the rule of thumb. An SDR could probably handle about 300 contacts in a sequence at a time. With dynamic AI, they can have 600 ones, because it's only going to serve up the most engaged of that. And it's going to pull back on the people who aren't engaged. So that's the third final thing that machines do better, or they can read that. They can also look, I don't know whether you deal a lot with intent signals with companies like 6 Sense or Demandbase. Those companies identify if someone's been on your website, are they searching the internet, looking for problems that you solve, and then they will feed in information to you to say, hey, this company, you should talk to them and do that. So that's another thing AI can do, is read that, add that into the algorithm, and prioritize people who are doing that. So those are, like, if you ask a rep to do that, what they're expected to do is go look in Salesforce, look in under the 6 Sense tab, read and see whether or not there's intent. And we know a rep's not doing that.
Yes.
So
it's weird with that. I mean, obviously TechTarget is positioned uniquely because they've got to fill in their names and, different level of intent you're familiar with. But from the other, ABM players, 6 Sense and Demandbase, all you really do, you just know who, the company name, and then as without leveraging AI, then you got to go figure it out. But then if you can leverage AI and say, okay, and if it's a sales tool as an example, whatever, it's a sales forecasting tool or whatever, right? So then you're going to go through, okay, anybody that's in sales leadership, anybody financial,
sales ops,
CFO, sales ops, boom, then we're going to just go pepper them. But it's still amazing that there's not an easy way to find out what person is. But anyway, that's why they need.
No, I mean, there have some. The person would have had to come to your site. Without G2 Crowd and TechTarget do a really, and others do a good job of telling you who that person is. Mind you, it's much more expensive, because that's That's a
Yeah.
Glengarry lead, because you're really getting that exact individual. To your point, I did find it humorous when, colleagues in marketing would say, "Hey, we just sent you a really good one," and I'd be like, "Yeah, you told me somebody from SAP was on our website for 6 pages.
Right.
Someone at SAP. Good
Big deal.
luck with that, right?" And so yeah,
Yeah.
it is finding that if you know the personas you sell to, and
Yeah.
you know someone has then come, there's a ideally, or essentially, there's a project going on there. And we also have that same philosophy on inbound. Oftentimes, people will take the inbound lead from a person who's come in. They might be more junior in the company, and they've been assigned to research the project, and then they'll spend their time with that person. And we have a program called Inbound on Outbound, Outbound on Inbound, where what happens is that one lead comes in, then what the AI does is goes and looks for every single persona that you sell to, different than that person, but at that same company, and then automatically starts messaging and going to them to secure an appointment with the what would likely be, you're basically multi-threading into the team that there may be an inbound. But so often you'll see people just focus on the inbound that came in, and then try and work their way up into meeting after meeting to try and get the other people in. So again, that's another way of looking at, if you ask the human to do that, that would take them hours to go figure out and go and plug that in.
So it's kind of like, if we use a football analogy, it's like, okay, instead of assume all kickoffs are, going to go deep, and you get on the 1 yard line or 25 yard line, whatever, kind of leveraging AI, you're kind of starting on the 50 yard line. So you're kind of turbo boosting the time and where you're at in the actual sales stage to then go sell more. You still need the people to go do the selling and the high touch and the management, managing and leading and kind of everything else, but it really helps kind of turbo boost the whole process.
That's a great analogy. And you add to it too, when you think about it, oftentimes with teams you led in doing it, there's oftentimes this group of leads that could be, or customers that either went through a cycle and are no longer there, or they're a potential TAM, but people have ignored it or said,
Or
we
you
just,
talked to somebody a year ago
yeah,
and they were kind of some interest, not now, the reps
yeah,
change. And then all of a sudden it's like nobody does anything with
no
it.
one does
And
that.
I have this with some of my clients. I'm like, okay, we talked to them like a year ago. They're interested. Reps are kind of almost incented to put it in closed lost. All of a sudden it's gone. You don't realize it's steel reg to sales community or anything else. And all of a sudden a new rep comes on, they're starting net new. I'm like, hello, do you realize that the CRO was actually interested in doing ABC, but this wasn't the right time? And then you go, oh yeah, hey, now it's great. But it's,
It's crazy that there's so many that oftentimes, and so that also is another area where the machines are better, because someone's sitting there going, we're never going to cover that. It's either a greenfield, or we've wondered whether that vertical would be good for us. We're not willing to commit to putting the bodies against it, but we wouldn't mind having some conversations if meetings came in. So why don't we go after that segment or vertical and put the machine on it and see what kind of meetings boil up from that, and do that side of it. So what's so interesting is when you go into companies, and obviously you're doing your job if you're listening to them and you're understanding where their pipeline problem is, and you're working with them to help solve it, you realize and see a lot of the problems come up around just don't have enough people, don't have the, to be able to cover the potential TAM that's out there. And so then that's where this idea of like, make your people more efficient on their highest value thing and let the machines do the other part. And it really complements. Then what's going to happen is the company gets more successful, and then people get promoted and they work and they get to their job is more interesting, because everything I've mentioned to you of what the machine does is the least interesting part of the job. The least interesting, right? So how is that a negative? It's like, make my job more interesting. if you're a salesperson and you don't think the most interesting part of your job is talking to people, then you're in the wrong profession and doing that side. So anything that gets you out of, data entry and data extraction and has you having conversations with clients is a positive change.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how you frame it up.
Awesome. Hey, I should have injected earlier. So the awesome having Lee here. Lots of great information here how to leverage AI to sell more and build more pipeline. But for anybody watching, please feel free to comment or ask any questions as well. And we got Tucker behind the scenes here to help pull them up. So feel free to chime in with any questions or comments as well. Also interesting that it's a kind of a board thing as well, right? It was like, what are we doing to leverage AI to sell more? So on the one hand, you want to do it just because it's the right thing to do. The other hand is you can also kind of check the box from that board pressure, just like there used to be pressure. What are we doing around cloud?
Right. I mean, and I think in the case you bring up, the history of the cloud, those companies that made that decision to go early in the cloud and to start structuring their business that way did receive the promise of the cloud. Right. And all the benefits that came from it. That was an early adopter play, and you certainly saw the advantages of companies that did that. Very similar with AI, and those that are. And you see that certainly, and then we ask, hey, what had you take this call? Why do you reach out, or why do you accept the call, this meeting from the SDR? And oftentimes they will say, I've been asked to, our whole company, a directive is we need to show how we're using AI to solve our problems, increase our efficiency, do that in each department across the company. And that is a edict that's come down. So we're exploring that. And I think that's another thing for salespeople, being consultative, being like, this isn't a transactional deal potentially right out of the way. If a person tells you they're coming in to learn, to want to do that, this is really an opportunity to build that trust and build that relationship by introducing them and exposing them to the best practices and what's happening with the early adopters and doing that. And that's, I know in the types of sales you were doing and the teams you were running, consultative selling was really, essential. Like that was it. You had to have that quality. And many times in some of the SaaS transactional models that people have been doing, sales reps haven't had the opportunity to master consultative selling.
Yeah, especially during COVID, it was kind of the fish were jumping in the boat a lot of times, and they thought that what didn't stink, and all of a sudden you're like, geez, well, this is actually hard. I've got to push and everything else. But anyway, let me kind of move on to some other things here. So, from a pipeline generation perspective, we'll talk about kind of email and cold calling. Right. So, email obviously these days is a lot tougher because of all the gates and blockers that are up. So would you characterize email kind of as a necessary evil, but kind of yields a lot worse results than what it kind of historically
does? It's certainly getting harder, because so many people with the proliferation. I mean, when I started at Outreach, there were 400 customers. They're now well into the thousands, the high thousands. And then you add SalesLoft into that, you add Groove, you add all the others. So first you're having so many people who have bought into this. So it does make the inboxes a lot more crowded. But to your point, the emails that stand out are the ones we all have our own personal experience in it. And you go through your inbox or you go through your LinkedIn, and there's certain messages and that stand out, and that comes back to the personalization. So I still think email is a there hasn't been anything to replace it as being a really efficient way to get in front of people, especially getting in front of people at that moment. I can't tell you how many we see in the replies that, wow, I just came out of a meeting where we were discussing this.
Yeah.
That timing that you just, where, how else are you going to be able to do that side?
Yeah, absolutely. And then what about cold call? How do you feel about cold calling?
So that's where I would prefer warm calling. And that's where I was describing what the AI can do by serving up the people who are more engaged. That call's going to certainly be warmer versus. So I think in most organizations, when you talk to them, if they have sort of a SDR or full cycle salespeople, the stats remain true. 70% of the meetings booked happen from the phone call. Now, it doesn't mean it would be lower if you didn't email and you didn't have the social touch. So it's the combination of the three. But the phone call is where you get the commitment and the confirmation. And you're also able to get a bit of qualification that makes the initial meeting more effective. So I'm all in on warm calling. And I'm all in on that because it still delivers the most meetings and you're able to get great qualification information out of that call, which you wouldn't get on, a person who writes back and goes, this sounds great. Thursday at 2 p.m. works for me. And someone books that meeting at Thursday at 2 p.m. and they really haven't done any qualification and they really haven't done that side. So I'm very pro warm calling and I'm very, still feel that email as a channel. And I think the forgotten channel is LinkedIn, because what we see happen is if you're connected to a person or they accepted your invitation, they're not as selective as you are, but the person selects their invite or they comment on their posts or they connect or like their information. When that call comes in and they see it on their phone or that they know who that person is, they have a connection, and that's where that omni-channel, all in on that.
Yeah. There's also what we can talk offline, but a company we do a lot of work with, Phone Ready Leads, who's done great. So they kind of will if you take kind of that basket of folks, they can actually tell you which ones have more of a propensity to actually pick up the phone. So if you leverage what you can do, plus then going to sellers and say, look, here's the ones you should prioritize calling because they're more inclined to pick up the phone, that could be a perfect storm for sure.
Exactly. And then that adds another element in, which is the parallel or power dialer, which is, again, if you do it right, it can be a very effective process to that warm calling process, because what it's able to do is, as you know, with that, is sort power dial through a number, get connections to the propensity to the people who would accept, and then a rep can have 4 to 6 conversations in an hour, which they normally wouldn't have if they were just dialing one, leaving a voicemail, dialing one, doing that side of it. And that becomes sort of another one of these efficiencies that make that calling process more effective.
Yeah. Awesome. So want to find out a little bit more about Regie.ai here as we're kind of toward the end. So I know you're coming off your best quarter yet. From kind of ideal customer profile, kind of who do you focus on in terms of for your own selling, kind of decision makers as well as type of company, size company?
Sure. Right now, I think what we're seeing is enterprise customers or large, I would say commercial and enterprise customers. So you might say 250 and above. And we speak to sales leaders, we speak to RevOps leaders, we speak to marketing leaders. When you think about that pipeline problem, oftentimes marketing is responsible for pipeline in the initial. In fact, in many companies, the SDRs roll up to the marketers. So that's an important persona, as well as I said, RevOps and sales leaders, and that side of it. Those are the three constituents who tend to have a pipeline problem, and finding that 250. Now we started out there, as well as with some very good size enterprise companies. We're fortunate that we built the technology. Sri, one of the co-founders, is genius, I have to say, and he built the software for enterprise right out of the gate. So that's allowed us to come in and get some great enterprise style companies to be able to use the technology right away.
That's great.
If I look at it, I would say, I think having a person who has a process in place and is looking to fine tune and improve it is always the best customer, because that's what we, as Regie, we can come in and help do using AI as that. And I compare that to a person who's like a smaller company who's just like, we don't have people who pick up the phones and call, and we don't have, they don't have the process in place. It's harder to make that successful versus someone who's doing really, well, and we can help improve that process.
Yeah, definitely. Any kind of one or two enterprise customer names?
Yeah, I mean, feel free, go to the website and look at some of the examples in doing that. But we have Pluralsight and Amplitude and Workday, and you'll see Reputation, and a number who have given really good case studies and doing things for us, and their experiences in doing that side of it, and just brought on, yes, a number of others. But I'm not sitting, sorry about that. I have to think through the contract. You know how it is sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Don't worry. But anyway,
say the names, and sometimes names. I don't want to be the guy who they go, "What are you doing, Lee?" But we really exciting. A number of Vista equity companies have jumped aboard, and I also noticed, it's funny how you'll start selling and you go, oh, that's a good, like, PE companies, because they're having to operate at most efficiency, and they're looking always for that kind of insights, and they're cutting edge. So you start seeing in those PE companies, they have like best practices sessions, and we're hearing that people show up at those and talk about what they're doing with us. And then we get 3 calls, and you're like, I love this inbound.
Yeah, totally. Really, really, really great. So time flies when you're having fun.
Oh no. Well, this was great.
But you're definitely great, amazing company. For sure, you're right in the wheelhouse, and so much great content here. So really appreciate having you. So at the end, I know we haven't really known each other. Don't know if you have any PG Randy story to share.
Well, from that event we attended, like, I would say it's probably PG, because there are times where, I don't know, where you're exposed to someone, or you just meet someone randomly, whether it's on a plane or at an event like this, and you feel like it's a long lost brother, or you have, like I said, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. You could just sit there and have, like, oh my God, this person, that, and you had this experience. And that doesn't happen a lot to me, but when I met you, it was really refreshing to have that. It's so great to have that experience, that you're this person who, we didn't meet before. We had, from 2 different coasts, all different things, but we could have so many connections. And that evening that we were sitting together at the dinner was like, flew by. And then every time we saw each other throughout the weekend, we had all these other laughs and doing it. And I remember you said at that time, hey, I want to have you on the thing. And I was like, oh, that's just a line, like, oh, I'll have you on. You like those people, oh, you'll come over for a barbecue. And you're like, no, I'm going to have you on the show. And so the fact that this is all come together, and you are truly, truly an authentic individual, like your book, for anyone who hasn't read it, that your book is so value. It's probably one of the most practical. I can't tell you how many times I go. Thank you. I go to that.
I'm not going to throw the link up. Thanks.
Your index. It's like I just looked through it when I have someone, and it was like, boom. Go there, grab a chart out, look at how you approached it or one of your guest speakers. Just so I definitely want to encourage that. So great to meet you and continue this relationship.
Same, ditto back at you. So appreciate it. So awesome. Thank you so much. Tucker, as always, will kind of get this replayed over all the different social mediums. Next week, we have Rich Kaczarski, who's at Dynatrace. Week after that, Scott Wood at HPE. And then actually at end of May 29th, Jim Delia, who runs Global Ops at Workday. So
that's wonderful.
Might be a good one for you to be on as well. So anyway, Lee, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I forgot to give a shout out.
Cannonballers.
Billy's team here in Kannapolis.
How great! What a great dad to come down and check out those games.
Always. So, all right, everybody, have a great week, and thank